My daughter has been gone for 7 years, and for 7 years I told myself that every sacrifice I made, every dollar I sent, every phone call I answered at midnight, every holiday I spent alone was for her, to honor her memory, to take care of what she left behind. But last spring, a 9-year-old little girl looked up at me with her mother's eyes and said 4 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Grandma, where do we live?" That was the moment I realized I hadn't been honoring my daughter's memory. I had been funding someone's lie.
My name is Carol. I'm 63 years old. I live in a small house in Knoxville, Tennessee, the same house where I raised my daughter, Melissa, for 22 years. Melissa was my whole world. I know every mother says that, but with us, it was different. It was just the two of us from the time she was 4 years old, after her father packed a bag one Tuesday morning and never came back. I worked 2 jobs, a dental office receptionist during the day and a weekend shift at a grocery store, so that Melissa could take ballet lessons, go on school trips, and never feel like she was missing something because she came from a broken home. She was spectacular. Bright, funny, kind to her core. The kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought soup to neighbors she barely knew when they were sick. She became a registered nurse at 24, and I remember sitting in the audience at her pinning ceremony, crying so hard the woman next to me handed me an entire travel pack of tissues. When she was 26, she met Derek. Derek was tall, charming, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say and exactly when to say it. He was a project manager at a construction company, well-dressed, good with words. He made Melissa laugh. And because Melissa loved him, I loved him too, or at least, I tried my very hardest to. They got married when she was 28. I paid for most of the wedding. I didn't mind. She was glowing that day. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Little Emma. Born in March, with Melissa's same dark curly hair and her same wide, curious eyes. I flew up to Virginia the day after Emma was born and I held that baby for 6 hours straight. Life felt full. It felt right. And then, 14 months after Emma was born, Melissa collapsed at work. A brain aneurysm. Massive. Instant. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. She was 31 years old. I don't have the words, even now, 7 years later, to describe what that kind of loss does to a person. Losing a child is its own category of pain. It's not grief that fades. It's grief that relocates. It moves into your chest and takes up permanent residence. You just learn, slowly, how to breathe around it. But I had a reason to keep going. I had Emma. And I had Derek, my son-in-law, the father of my granddaughter, the man my daughter had chosen. In those early weeks, we cried together. We went through Melissa's things together. We held Emma between us and we made each other a quiet, tearful promise. We would take care of this little girl. Together. For Melissa. About 2 months after the funeral, Derek came to me with a conversation I wasn't expecting. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, coffee going cold between his hands, and he told me that he was struggling. That Melissa had handled most of their finances, that he had some debt he was embarrassed about, that with a toddler and a mortgage, he was barely keeping his head above water. He wasn't asking for money, he said. He just wanted me to know. I wrote him a check for $15,000 before he left my house that evening. That was the beginning. Over the next year, I restructured my entire financial life around Derek and Emma. I was still working. I'd moved up to office manager at the dental practice by then, and I had some savings, plus a modest life insurance policy that Melissa had taken out naming me as partial beneficiary. I made a decision, one that felt noble and right at the time. I would send Derek $40,000 a year, broken into monthly payments of just over $3,300. Enough to cover their mortgage, Emma's daycare, groceries, whatever they needed. I told myself it was what Melissa would have wanted. Derek was grateful, at first. He called every Sunday. He sent me photos of Emma regularly. He brought her down to Knoxville for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and those visits were the highlight of my entire year. Watching Emma run through my house, sleeping in the room I decorated for her with purple butterflies on the wall, those moments sustained me. But somewhere around year 3, things started shifting. The Sunday calls got shorter, then less frequent. He started texting instead, brief, vague check-ins. Emma's great. Busy week. Talk soon. When I asked about visiting, there was always a reason it wasn't a great time. Work was crazy. Emma had activities. The house was being painted. I pushed the unease down. I told myself he was a single father, overwhelmed. I told myself grief looks different on different people. I sent the money every month without fail, and I told myself that was enough. But then small things started catching my attention. Derek had mentioned, the previous year, that he was struggling to keep up with the mortgage. But a mutual friend, someone who had attended Melissa and Derek's wedding, mentioned casually in conversation that she'd heard Derek had sold their Virginia house. Sold it? I called Derek that night. He told me he'd downsized. Found something more manageable. Gave me a new address without me even asking for it. He sounded smooth. Unbothered. I wrote the new address in my address book and sent Emma a birthday card there, and I tucked the question away somewhere in the back of my mind. Then there was the Christmas visit where Emma, who was 7 by then, mentioned someone named Miss Stacy, who made pancakes on Saturdays. I asked Derek later who Stacy was. He said she was a neighbor who helped with Emma sometimes. A babysitter, basically. I wanted to believe him. So I did. But the unease didn't go away. It just got louder. The moment everything cracked open happened because of a school project. Emma was in 3rd grade. Her class was doing a family history project, a family tree, with photos and a short paragraph about each household. Her teacher had asked the kids to bring in something that represented their home. Derek asked me if I could send some photos of Melissa for the project. Of course I said yes. I overnighted a small envelope with 4 printed photographs: Melissa at her nursing ceremony, Melissa holding newborn Emma, Melissa and me at Christmas, and one from their wedding. A week later, Emma called me from what I assumed was Derek's phone. But the voice in the background wasn't Derek's. It was a woman's voice. And then I heard a child's voice, a young child, maybe 2 or 3 years old, and Emma said, completely naturally, "Hold on, Grandma, the baby's crying." The baby? I sat very still. "Emma," I said carefully, "whose baby is that?" And she said, as innocent and matter-of-fact as only a child can be, "That's my brother, Grandma. His name is Cooper. He's 2. I couldn't speak. Emma kept talking, telling me about Cooper's birthday party and how he'd smashed his cake, and all I could do was sit there in my kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the floor slowly disappear beneath me. Derek had a child. A 2-year-old son. Which meant that while I had been sending him $40,000 a year, money I told myself was for Emma, for Melissa's child, for Melissa's memory, Derek had been building a new life. A new woman. A new baby. A new house. And he had never said a single word to me. I didn't call Derek that night. I couldn't. I was afraid of what I would say. I went to Melissa's room, the room that's still hers in my house, where I've kept her debate trophies and her senior portrait, and the little ceramic angel she made me in 5th grade, and I sat on the edge of the bed and I talked to her. Out loud. The way I do sometimes, when things get to be too much. "Did you know?" I asked her. "Did you know who he really was?" Of course she didn't answer. But I swear, in that silence I heard her. Not words exactly. Just a feeling. Like a hand on my shoulder. "Pay attention, Mom." I started doing what I should have done years earlier. I started paying attention. I looked up Derek online. I found his social media, something I'd never really explored because I'm not much of a social media person, and I created a fake account, and I found his profile. He had it partially public. And what I saw made my stomach turn completely over. Photos of a beautiful house, not a downsized, manageable house, but a large, gorgeous home with a wraparound porch and a swimming pool. Photos with a woman named Stacy, yes, the neighbor Stacy, who was clearly not a neighbor at all but his girlfriend, possibly fiancée, based on the ring I could see on her finger in a photo from what looked like a vacation in Florida. Photos of Cooper. Photos of Emma. Family photos. A whole family. A whole beautiful life. Funded, in significant part, by a grieving 63-year-old woman in Knoxville, Tennessee, who had been sending money every month for 7 years because she believed she was honoring her dead daughter. I had sent Derek $280,000. $280,000. I want to tell you that I immediately called a lawyer. That I acted decisively and calmly and with dignity. But the truth is, I spent about 2 weeks in a fog of pure grief, not just about the betrayal, but because confronting what Derek had done meant confronting something even harder, the possibility that I had used sending that money as a substitute for actually processing losing Melissa. That I had kept myself numb and busy and needed by pouring resources into Derek so that I could still feel like a mother. That realization hurt more than the money. But one morning I woke up, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Derek had sat 7 years ago looking helpless, and I made a decision. No more. I called my attorney, a woman I'd used for estate planning, and I laid everything out for her. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Carol, you've been sending this money voluntarily. There's no legal obligation here. You can stop today." And then she said something else. She said, "But there may be a case here for fraudulent misrepresentation, depending on what he told you about how the money was being used." I thought about every phone call, every text, every vague reassurance that things were tight and Emma needed things and he was just barely managing. I started keeping records. I also made a phone call to Emma's school. I spoke with her guidance counselor, explained that I was Emma's maternal grandmother and that I had concerns about my granddaughter's well-being. I was careful and measured. I didn't say anything accusatory. I simply asked if there was a way to establish contact and visitation rights, and the counselor told me what I needed to know. Emma was enrolled, she was doing well, and her emergency contact listed only Derek and Stacy. My name wasn't on a single piece of paper. Melissa's mother. Not on one piece of paper. Then came the phone call from Emma. She had turned 9 a few months before. She was calling from a number I didn't recognize. I found out later it was her school's office phone. She said, "Daddy doesn't know I'm calling." My heart started pounding. She told me she'd heard her dad and Stacy arguing the night before. She said Stacy had told Derek to stop taking money from some sad old woman. Then Emma said, "Grandma, where do we live? Like our real address? Because Dad said you don't need to know where we live anymore." 9 years old. Calling her grandmother from a school phone because something had told her, that same instinct that comes from Melissa's blood running in her veins, that something wasn't right. I wrote down the school's name from the caller ID. I had an address. What happened next I will not take full credit for, because honestly, karma moved faster than I did. My attorney sent Derek a formal letter informing him that the monthly payments were ending immediately and requesting a full accounting of how the funds had been used over 7 years, citing verbal representations he had made regarding financial hardship and child-related expenses. Derek called me within 24 hours. He was furious. He told me I was unstable. He told me I was trying to interfere in his life. He told me Emma was fine and didn't need me causing drama. I let him talk. I said almost nothing. And when he was finished, I said very quietly, "Derek, I want to see my granddaughter. We can do this kindly or we can do this legally. That decision is yours." He hung up. 3 weeks later, I filed for grandparent visitation rights in the state where Emma lived. My attorney filed the motion. Derek hired his own attorney. And here is where the story gets interesting. During the court process, which required financial disclosures from both parties, Derek had to account for his income and expenses. And what came out during that process told a story that made even his own attorney look uncomfortable. Derek had refinanced the house twice in 5 years, each time pulling out significant equity. He and Stacy had taken 4 vacations in 3 years. He had bought a boat. He had bought a boat while telling me he was barely surviving as a single father. The judge reviewing the grandparent visitation case took note of the financial history in the context of the custody evaluation, because part of the evaluation involved Emma speaking privately with a child advocate, who reported that Emma had expressed that she missed her grandmother and wanted to see her. Out of the mouth of a 9-year-old girl came the truth that 7 years of manipulation had tried to bury. The court granted me visitation. Regular, scheduled, protected visitation. 8 weeks in the summer and alternating holidays. As for the $280,000, I won't pretend I recovered all of it, or even most of it. I didn't. Voluntary gifts are difficult to reclaim legally. But my attorney was able to negotiate a settlement agreement tied to the visitation terms, and Derek, rather than face a fraud examination that might complicate his mortgage and his professional licenses, agreed to repay $60,000 over 5 years. It wasn't everything. But it was something. And more than the money, more than any of it, I got Emma. This past summer, Emma spent 6 weeks with me in Knoxville. She slept in the Purple Butterfly room. She found an old photo album on my bookshelf and spent an entire rainy afternoon going through it, asking me questions about her mother. What was she like? Was she funny? Did she like music? Did she look like me? I answered every question. For hours. At one point Emma held up a photo of Melissa at about 9 years old, gap-toothed, laughing, standing in this very backyard, and she held it next to her own face and looked at me with this expression that broke me open in the best possible way. We have the same smile, Grandma. Yes, baby. You do. I've asked myself many times over these past months what I would have done differently. Would I have sent money at all? Honestly, yes. Some of it. Because Emma was real, and Emma's needs were real, and I never regret a single dollar that made that little girl's life easier. But I should have been present instead of just paying. I let guilt and grief convince me that writing a check was the same as showing up. It isn't. It never is. Derek used my pain against me. He looked at a grieving mother, and he saw a resource. And I made it easy for him because I was so desperate to stay connected to Melissa that I would have given him anything he asked for. That stops now. Melissa was brilliant and brave, and she raised a daughter exactly like her. Emma called me from that school phone because something in her knew. Because you cannot fully extinguish the instinct that comes from being loved right, and Melissa loved that little girl right in the 14 months she had with her. Some people will take everything you offer. They'll take your grief and your love and your money and your silence, and they will build a comfortable life on top of your loss. Don't let them. Honor the people you've lost by protecting what they left behind, not by funding the people who never deserved them in the first place. Emma is safe. Emma knows her mother's face. Emma knows my voice. That is Melissa's legacy. And that is enough. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, there are more stories like this one waiting for you.